And now, it's the 2K Online Franchise Sports Report with your host Marcus Reed and Ava Turner.
Welcome back, everybody, to the 2K Online Franchise Radio Network. It's Monday, December 16th. I'm Marcus Reed. And man, it feels good to be back.
Definitely feels good to be back in the booth. A little time off can recharge the batteries, even for football fanatics like us.
You said it. Speaking of recharging, I finally got to take that trip to Costa Rica, soaked up some sun, gorgeous beaches. But even with the sand between my toes, I was still keeping an eye on those 2KOLF scores. What about you? What did you do with your time off?
Well, I finally tackled that mountain of a home improvement project I had been putting off. But let me assure you, the 2K Online Franchise website was open on my phone the entire time. Wouldn't miss a beat.
Of course not. So now we're back, and we're ready to unpack the first of many exciting matchups from Week 6, the game of the week, the Ravens versus the Browns. This one had it all. And let's not forget the added drama of the Sahagun brothers coaching against each other. Anthony leading the Ravens, Marcus at the helm for the Browns. It's always a battle for bragging rights when these two clash. But this time, I feel like the stakes were even higher.
What's fascinating here is that this rivalry, it runs deeper than just family ties. Remember, the Browns knocked the Ravens out of the playoffs last season? You could practically feel the Ravens' hunger for revenge in the air.
All right, so this game was a roller coaster ride from start to finish. Forget a boring chronological recap. We're talking wild momentum swings, defensive touchdowns, and some truly jaw-dropping individual performances. Where do we even begin?
Let's start with the Browns scoring a strategy. They drew first blood, but it was a bit unconventional. Dustin Hopkins, their kicker, was practically automatic, nailing 4 field goals throughout the game. His first one, a 23-yarder, gave Cleveland an early 3-0 lead, but relying so heavily on field goals makes you wonder, were they struggling in the red zone?
That's a great point. It almost seemed like they were settling for those 3 points instead of punching it into the end zone.
Yeah.
But, even with the Browns getting on the board first, the Ravens just have this way of seizing momentum. Lamar Jackson doing what Lamar Jackson does, orchestrated the Ravens offense beautifully. He connected with Danny Gray for an 8-yard touchdown, snatching the lead right back. Gray actually had a pretty impressive game overall, 6 catches for 41 yards, definitely becoming a reliable target for Jackson.
And that touchdown to Gray, that was a textbook example of how the Ravens can shift the energy of a game. It wasn't just the points on the board, it was the way they moved the ball, the way the crowd roared. You could feel the momentum swinging in their favor.
Absolutely. And then we got this back and forth action. It had me on the edge of my seat. Hopkins added another field goal for the Browns. But Jackson answered right back before halftime with a picture-perfect 38-yard touchdown pass to rookie Devontae Walker. The poise on that kid, hauling it in like a seasoned veteran. At halftime, the Ravens were up 14-9. And I have to admit, I thought they were going to cruise to victory.
Right. I was starting to think the same thing. But the third quarter is where things got really interesting. It started with a bang, literally. Odafe O scooped up a fumble for the Ravens and took it all the way for a 31-yard touchdown. Now it's 21-9, and you could feel the energy shifting even more towards the Ravens.
It felt like a knockout punch. But to their credit, the Browns refused to back down. Joe Milton III, who had a monster game passing the ball, connected with tight end David Njoku for a 26-yard touchdown.
Njoku was a beast all game for the Browns. 131 receiving yards. Milton clearly trusted him to make those big plays.
But then, just when it felt like the Browns were clawing their way back, their defense delivers this game-changing play. And for those of you who may be new to football, a game-changing play is basically a play that dramatically alters the course of the game. So Greg Newsome II intercepts Lamar Jackson and takes it to the house for a 26-yard pick six. For anyone unfamiliar with the term, a pick six is when a defensive player intercepts the quarterback's pass and runs it back for a touchdown. It was wild.
Talk about a turning point. Not only did it put points on the board for the Browns, but it swung the energy back in their favor. For a moment, it felt like they were going to completely flip the script.
It was a true nail-biter, that's for sure. Now, before we dive into that crazy fourth quarter, just a quick reminder that this was just the game of the week, and Week 6 is still ongoing in the 2K Online franchise.
That's right. There's a whole lot more exciting football to come. But before we move on, any initial thoughts from you on this back-and-forth battle? Anything that surprised you?
I think what surprised me most was the Browns' offensive strategy. I mean, Joe Milton III threw for over 400 yards. Didn't see that coming. It seemed like they almost abandoned the run game.
Right. 441 passing yards and 2 touchdowns for Milton. That's pretty remarkable, especially considering they have Nick Chubb in the backfield, who's known for his powerful running. It's like they decided to air it out and see what happened. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We left off with the Browns buzzing after that incredible pick six. What happened next?
Well, that fourth quarter, it was a whirlwind. It was like both teams were throwing everything they had at each other, refusing to give an inch. The Browns kept the pressure on, with Hopkins continuing his perfect night, nailing a 56-yard field goal. Talk about clutch. That gave them a 22-21 lead. And then Milton, who was putting on a passing clinic, connected with Anthony Schwartz for a 22-yard touchdown, putting the Browns up by 8.
You mentioned a passing clinic, but was it really all that impressive? I mean, yeah, he racked up the yards, but he also threw that crucial interception that led to the Ravens' game-winning touchdown.
You're right, that interception was a turning point. But I still think Milton's performance deserves some credit. He was making some difficult throws, threading the needle through tight coverage. He was connecting with Njoku Schwartz, even Chubb out of the backfield. I think he showed real potential in this game, even with the mistakes.
That's fair, but you've got to give credit to the Ravens' defense, too. They never lost their composure, even when the Browns were putting up points. They kept the pressure on Milton, and it ultimately paid off with that incredible play by Marcus Williams.
Oh, absolutely. That interception was a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
Williams read Milton's eyes perfectly, jumped the route, and took it 65 yards to the house for a Ravens touchdown. You could feel the momentum shift instantly. The Ravens sideline erupted, and you knew they were back in control.
And then to really put the game on ice, Derrick Henry, who had been relatively quiet up until this point, burst through the line for a 39-yard touchdown run. Game over. Ravens win 40-32. It was like Henry was saving his energy for that final blow.
Henry's touchdown. It was the perfect exclamation point on a hard-fought victory for the Ravens. They faced some real challenges in this game, but they showed incredible resilience, overcoming early setbacks and answering every Browns score with a big play of their own. It's that ability to bounce back that makes them such a formidable opponent.
Okay, so we've talked about the flow of the game. But what about the individual performances? Lamar Jackson had a solid game for the Ravens, 202 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, even added a rushing touchdown for good measure, classic Lamar. But I want to hear your take on his performance. Was it just another day at the office, or did you see anything that really stood out?
I think what impressed me most about Jackson's performance was his composure. He threw that early interception, but he didn't let it rattle him. He came back strong, made smart decisions, and ultimately led his team to victory. That kind of mental toughness is what separates the good quarterbacks from the great ones.
I agree. He didn't let that early mistake define his game. Now, we can't talk about individual performances without mentioning Joe Milton III. I mean, 441 passing yards for the Browns. We've already touched on it. But I'm curious to hear your more in-depth analysis. Was this just a fluke? Or do you think he's finally finding his stride?
It's tough to say for sure based on just one game. But I think this performance definitely shows his potential. He made some throws that even seasoned veterans would envy. He was connecting with a variety of receivers, showing good pocket presence and making quick decisions. Of course, he also made some mistakes, but that's to be expected from a young quarterback.
And speaking of setbacks, we have to address the unfortunate injury to Ravens wide receiver Rashad Bateman. He suffered broken ribs and is expected to be out for 5 weeks.
That's a huge blow for the Ravens. Bateman has been a key contributor to their offense this season. It's going to be interesting to see how they adjust their game plan without him in the lineup. Do you think this will impact their offensive strategy significantly?
It definitely has the potential to. Bateman is a reliable target for Jackson, and his absence will leave a void in their passing game. They have other talented receivers like Danny Gray and Devontae Walker, but it'll be interesting to see how they step up and fill that role. It might force them to lean more heavily on the run game with Derrick Henry.
I think you're right. They might need to get creative with their play calling and find ways to utilize their other offensive weapons. It's almost like a band losing a key member. They have to adapt and find a new rhythm. It'll be a challenge, but I have faith in their coaching staff to come up with a solid plan.
All right, so let's talk about what this win means for the Ravens and what the loss means for the Browns, especially in the context of the AFC North race.
Well, with this win, the Ravens move to 5-1 and are firmly in control of the AFC North. They have a tough matchup next week against the Packers.
Yeah.
But they're looking like the team to beat in their division.
But with Bateman's injury, do you really think they have the AFC North under control?
Yeah, that's a good point. That Bateman injury could definitely throw a wrench into their plans. It's still early in the season, and anything can happen. The Browns, on the other hand, they fall back to 500 at 3-3, and their road to the playoffs just got a lot tougher. They'll be hosting the Lions next week in a game they absolutely need to win. Both said it. They showed some real grit in this game, even in the loss. What are your thoughts on their outlook for the rest of the season?
I think the Browns. They're still a team with a lot of potential. Milton showed that he's capable of putting up big numbers, and they have a solid core of players around him. But they need to find more consistency, especially on offense. They can't rely solely on Milton's arm. They need to establish more balanced attack and get Nick Chubb more involved in the game.
I agree. If they can find that balance and clean up some of the mistakes, they could still be a contender in the AFC North. But they have a tough road ahead. This game against the Lions is crucial for them. A loss would drop them below 500 and put them in a real hole in the playoff race.
This game really highlights the fine margins in the NFL. Both teams had moments of brilliance. But in the end, the Ravens made the key plays when they mattered most. It's those crucial moments that often determine the outcome of a game.
It was definitely a game that lived up to the hype, and it sets the stage for what promises to be an exciting second half of the season.
Absolutely. The action continues, and there's still a lot of football to be played.
Now, for our listeners, I want to emphasize that this was just one of many exciting matchups in Week 6 of the 2K Online franchise.
That's right. The action continues, and there are still plenty of storylines to follow across the league.
Absolutely. So make sure you head over to the league website, 2KOLF.com, for all the latest scores, stats, standings, and more.
It's your one-stop shop for everything 2K Online franchise. You can catch highlights, game recaps, and even check out the latest trash talk in the forums.
And while we're on the topic of storylines, I can't help but think about the Sahagun brothers and what this win means for their rivalry. This was their first meeting since the Browns knocked the Ravens out of the playoffs last season. Do you think this victory gives Anthony some bragging rights at the next family gathering?
Oh, I'm sure he'll be relishing this win for a while. You know how competitive these brothers are, but I wouldn't count Marcus out just yet. The Browns showed some real fight in this game, and they'll be looking for revenge when these two teams meet again later this season. It's shaping up to be a season-long battle for AFC North supremacy.
I can't wait to see how it all unfolds. But before we sign off, I want to hear your final thoughts on this game. What was the biggest takeaway for you?
For me, it was the Ravens' resilience. They faced some adversity early on with that interception and the Browns' strong offensive showing. But they never lost their composure. And they kept fighting. They made the key plays when they mattered most, and that's what ultimately led them to victory.
I agree. They showed the heart of a champion. And as for the Browns, they proved they're not a team to be taken lightly. Joe Milton III had a breakout performance. And they'll be a force to be reckoned with if they can find more consistency on offense.
Absolutely. This game was a microcosm of the NFL season. It's full of surprises, and anything can happen on any given Sunday.
Well said. And that's what makes it so exciting. We'll be back next week to break down more of the action from Week 6 and look ahead to the crucial Week 7 matchups. But until then, keep those controllers warm and get ready for more gridiron action.
And don't forget to visit 2KOLF.com for all the latest news and updates from the 2K Online franchise.
This has been the 2K Online Franchise Radio Network. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
This has been a presentation of the 2K Online Radio Network. For more information, visit our website at 2KOLF.com.